Tonight we're going to be talking about Babylon Rising and the First Shall Be Last. And my name is Rob Skiba. I am the co-founder of Kingsgate Media, along with my wife Sheila, that many of you met when you first came in. I am a filmmaker by trade and a researcher by hobby. And I do consider myself to be a researcher, and by that I mean I research that which has been searched by others before me. And I like to say that I'm an inquisitive person. I ask a lot of questions, and apparently I always have been. I visited my family in Massachusetts a few years ago and found my baby book. And my mom kept extensive notes on my early development. And in the section on speech development, she wrote, "He constantly questions everything." And on most unusual phrase that she said that I spoke was, "I just don't believe it." Apparently nothing's changed, because I'm pretty much still that way. I do question just about everything I hear, everything I see. I think we have to. My life verse growing up was 2 Timothy 2:15, "Study to show yourself approved." And I believe the scriptures teach us to be like a good Berean, to search these things out that we see and hear to see whether they be true. And that's what I've done pretty much my entire life. And what I'm going to be presenting tonight is the culmination of about 25 years worth of research that has been kind of scattered over the 25 years, but really focused in the last year and a half. Last year and a half, it's all I've done from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. is study, 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 the stuff that I'm going to be presenting here this evening. My journey really began with this scripture right here. "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man." Of course, that's a reference to the last days. How many of you think we're getting pretty close to the last days? I really do believe we're at the final seconds of this game, that we are definitely in the last days. Well, Jesus said that the last days are going to be like the days of Noah. And I always wonder, what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in human history? And there's only one thing. You know, Jesus gives the list of things to expect when the disciples asked him, what's it going to be like at the end of the age? And he gives Matthew 24, right? All these signs are going to happen. But there's always been wars. There's always been rumors of wars. There's always been pestilence. There's always been earthquakes. There's always been most of the things that Jesus lists in Matthew 24. So what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in human history? And oh, by the way, when we think about the days of Noah, it's not just the flood. Noah lived for 950 years, 600 years before the flood, and 350 years after the flood. And a lot of weird and strange and interesting things happened. And I would actually say there's two things that differentiate the days of Noah, all 950 years worth of it, from any other time. One would be the creation of hybrids. Two would be the creation of interdimensional portals. And I'll talk about that in a second. What is an interdimensional portal? I call the first one the Genesis 6 experiment, the creation of hybrids. The Genesis 6 experiment essentially is summed up in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. I've kind of focused right here on verse 4, where it talks about the giants, or Nephilim. That's the Hebrew word Nephilim. Were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. These are angels, not the sons of Seth. Kissing cousins are not going to produce Og, Bashan, or Goliath. So something else is going on there. And throughout the other texts, like Job, sons of God are angels. So I don't need to go much farther than that. These are documented skeletal remains and historical characters that we can look at in history and in the scriptures and validate the fact that giants did in fact exist. You got a 6-foot man there, it's kind of average Joe Blow there on the left, and then you got this Caesar right there, 8 foot tall. You got Goliath, you got Og, Bashan, all the way up to this guy, this skeletal remain that was found by the Carthaginians. I always get that name tripped up. Carthaginians in 650 BC, 36-foot tall guy. These are documented in history. Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, the spies go into the land, right? And what did they say? They said, "Wow, we look like grasshoppers by comparison." Amos 2:9 describes the Amorites as the size of cedar trees. Amos 2:9. Cedar trees start at 35 feet and go up to 150 feet, the cedars of Lebanon. So I'm going to talk about that in another teaching in a lot more depth called the Archon Invasion. But there are extra biblical texts, like the book of Enoch and others, that go into more detail about what happened in Genesis 6. The book of Enoch says that 200 fallen angels, a class of angels known as the Watchers, landed in this location right here. This is the center of a mountain range in southern Lebanon known as Mount Hermon. Now keep your eye right there as the camera pulls back, and just kind of look at the outline of the topography right there. It's very interesting that it actually forms the shape of a goat. And one of the worst of the fallen angels was one by the name of Azazel. And Azazel is always associated with the goat. And you see that in Leviticus chapter 16. The scapegoat is in reference to Azazel. I find it interesting that the land itself actually kind of looks like a goat head. This gentleman depicted here is David Flynn. He recently passed away, but he turned the world upside down with some of his research, and he was able to figure out that that location is 33.33 degrees north by 33.33 degrees east from the Paris prime meridian. Very interesting. What's 1/3 of 100? 33.3333%, right? How interesting that the fallen angels that participated in what I call the Genesis 6 experiment landed on the geographical location that fits their number, on the crosshairs of 33.33. Something else David Flynn pointed out is that if you put a little marker there, and you can do this for yourself, that what I showed you there was from Google Earth. I did it for myself to check it out. But you can put a marker there and then draw a line from there to the Paris prime meridian. We go by Greenwich today, but originally it was the Paris was kind of the standard for a long time there. And that is, in the occult, is referred to as the Devil's Line. You can draw a line from Mount Hermon to the Devil's Line, the Paris prime meridian. It's 2,012 nautical miles. Interesting. You could draw a line from there to the equator, and it's 2,012 nautical miles. 2012. Very interesting. Something else of note that I discovered is the fact that, contrary to what many believe regarding incursions of angels, that is, angels mating with humans, the phrase here and also after that is actually, in Genesis chapter 6, is actually in a pre-flood context. A lot of people like to associate that with the post-flood. While it's true there were giants post-flood, all of Genesis chapter 6 is in a pre-flood context. And all of them were produced as a result of the mixture of species, angels and humans, as well as animals and humans. The mixture of species is the Genesis 6 experiment.